Hello, welcome to another Album Musings. So this week's jump off point is this album, Explosions in the Sky, The Earth is Not a Cold, Dead Place. And as is the case with all these episodes now of Album Musings, is the idea behind it is I look at an album that I just, when I finally locked into it, I just played and played and played. And the album also features some of my favourite tracks of all time. But the question then gets raised and is part of this musing is I didn't listen to it in 2003. I didn't listen to it until around about 2007, 2008. So what was my journey to this album? And more importantly, what was I actually listening to in 2003? So this idea is, what was my musical thesis, my musical environment, if you like, in 2003, that in some ways pushed out, for whatever reason, me not discovering this album. And then along with this album, what other antitheses were there? Other albums that maybe I didn't listen to at the time, listened to later, or just didn't listen to at all. And in the course of thinking about 2003, in the build up to shooting this video, the only thing I really do is just listen to UK albums from around that time. And the reason behind that is because those are the albums that were most likely to be discovered, but didn't, if that makes sense. But I'll be talking about other albums as well, not just UK albums, but the focus of me sort of revisiting that in terms of music is I just was listening. This week I've been listening to albums from 2003 that I hadn't listened to before. And in one case I did at the time, but hadn't listened to it for a number of years. I wanted to refamiliarise myself with it. So this album's particularly special for lots of reasons. I have a shared appreciation of this album with my wife and the band generally. She's also into. And in actual fact, the very last track of the album, Your Hand in Mine, was one of the tracks, one of the pieces of music we actually played at our wedding. So it's also sort of very special in that respect. So I was trying to think, just before I started recording this, like what was my gateway into this? Like I said, I didn't listen to it at the time in 2003, but backtracking and looking at, a good way for me to do it is to think about post-rock generally, because I do very much explore or discover album through genre explorations, or at least that's what I was doing a lot at that time. So in terms of stuff I was listening to, and we'll come on to this in a moment actually, I was reading, because I wouldn't have heard any of this, I don't think, through the Friday Rock Show, or on, so there wasn't any potential to discover this through UK radio stations, I don't think. So anything that I discovered around that time that was out of the mainstream, because there's no streaming, would purely have been as a result of me reading the music press. And at that point, I would have been reading Terrorizer pretty exclusively. And it's quite possible the name of the band came up, but it doesn't really, I don't have much remembrance, memory of that. So yeah, let's try and explore what was distracting me. But first thing I want to do is just clear up with this, that the term post-rock, so through, and this is something I've looked at a while ago now, not because of doing this episode, but I was just curious about where the term post-rock came from. And I believe it was coined by music journalist Simon Reynolds in his review of the album for Mojo magazine. But there is some debate, I believe, around when was the first time that was used. But it seems to be that this is the album where it was used. So this is by a band called Bark Psychosis, and it's Hex's debut album. Now, retrospectively, often the post-rock timeline evolution, if you like, goes back to this album, particularly Spirit of Eden. And in actual fact, I did listen to this album a couple of weeks ago. I don't think I've done it. I'm not sure if I did a episode on 1988 or not, but for some reason, before I even started looking at 2003, I decided to actually get around to listening to this. I think I'd listened to it one time before, and yeah, it's quite different from their other stuff. I've also not listened to this. This is their debut album by Verve. So, yeah, I'll have to listen to that. But yeah, in terms of the term post-rock, yeah, it was kicking around. The point is, it was kicking around around 94. So now, the first band I think probably I listened to where the term could be applied or is applied is Sigur Rós and this album. Yeah, the second album. And that I picked up as a result of a end-of-year list in Terrorizer. Now, I think it was the 2000 list, even though this came out in 1999. For whatever reason, I think it was to do with international availability or where the album was available. It didn't make it, I don't think, in the 2000 list. So I probably listened to the album in 2001. And then from that point, I probably just tuned my ear in, I think, to other stuff. But I don't think I actively sought out much other post-rock beyond just accidentally stumbling across other stuff that happened to make it on end-of-year lists. And really, it wasn't until, I don't think, 2007-ish that I started to explore that. And I think it was tied in with me reading that book Ambient Century, actually, because there was quite a lot of overlap there. So yeah, and I'd obviously heard bands being name checked like Godspeed You Black Emperor, bands like that. I'll include links to those two, but also the article on post rock as well. Now, of course, once you start going back retrospectively, you can start to uncover maybe it's being used in other ways. So the name roughly corresponding to avant rock or out rock. And then here they've got it September 67, the Beatles. So, you could argue there might be certain Beatles tracks, and certainly, who else would I say? I mean, Velvet Underground, I think. Yeah, and then of course that whole era, David Bowie as well. The bands like Public Image Limited. So yeah, it's an interesting rabbit hole to go down if you're curious. But it appears that, certainly there's some very strong examples of it early in the 90s, sort of first wave. And then in the 2000s, you get various other bands coming along, but also it being integrated into bands that previously weren't necessarily post-rock, so like Radiohead. And then I suppose you could say it was like an extension of Swans, which had post-rock traits as well. Although, I suspect, a lot of their tracks again could be classified as post-rock. particularly some of the stuff on, or in terms of the stuff I've listened to, then I would probably say, was it Soundtracks for the Blind, maybe? But I'm sure there's earlier stuff than that. I'll include this list. I mean, it's not all-encompassing by any stretch, but 16 of the greatest post-rock albums. Yeah, so it's got Godspeed You Black Emperor, Rachel's Sonography, in 95 Days of Static. Funnily enough, it doesn't have the Bach Psychosis album on here, which is interesting. But it has a load of other ones. Now, I was thinking about this as well, and the Slint album, like, when did I listen to that? And that was definitely after I heard the Sigur Rós album. So, but I did buy that. And I was trying to remember the reason behind me buying that. And I don't believe it was as you know, again, stumbling across the term post-rock. I think it was exploring some other genre which they're also associated with. So, yeah. And obviously along the way, and it's not mentioned here, I'd gone down a bit of a math rock rabbit hole as well, and I'm sure there's links to that, although not quite as mellow as, say, Explosions in the Sky. If you look at their status, if you like, on the UK official album charts, it is interesting because really it wasn't until 2007 they got any exposure on the charts in the UK. This All of a Sudden I Miss Everyone album. And I have listened to that. I don't think I have it on CD, but I have subsequently listened to it on streaming. And I think I certainly have this one on vinyl, actually. It's 2016 album. So yeah, here would be when I got into them, and here is around when I picked up on them. So sometime here. And interestingly, there's been a big gap really from when I first started to really listen to them in terms of their output. And my understanding is that sometime after this album, they did start to get involved a lot more in soundtracks. And it is the case that several of their tracks from their albums have been used in various soundtracks, but they did get into doing specifically soundtracks as well. As you can see, there's been several recently. A run of, from 2013. They had quite a good run, actually. Pretty stable lineup. Yeah, I don't see any other. I mean, there's this lineup of 4 people, and then they use touring musicians. And there's no timeline, so that on Wikipedia normally indicates that the timeline, the lineup's pretty stable. And you can see there's quite a nice list of their music in popular culture. So, yeah, I'll include that as a link as well. So if I start to slice the years, like, what was I listening to? And what did I come to listen to? Now, so this album I definitely bought when it came out. And we'll have a look specifically at the end of a year list for Terrorizer and Kerrang to give me a bit more insight. But yeah, this one here. And we're looking currently at the rock album release for 2003. So I'm going to scroll down first and just try and point out albums that I listened to when they came out. And then I'll go back up and go listen to albums I listened to subsequently. So the next one I listened to when it came out was AFI. This one as well, The Darkness, Permission to Land. And I'll just stick on the first page. I won't go any deeper. Now scrolling back and just talking about albums that I've listened to either this week or, sometime after. So I listened to this album this week. I was more familiar with the Snow Patrol album that has Chasing Cars on it. But I remember having a friend of mine, their son was actually big into this album, and I never really got to listen to it. I mean, a lot of this album was played on the radio, but I didn't seek out the album. Fringers, didn't get into Mew until years later. I was introduced to them by my wife. Same with Billy Talent. That was an introduction through my wife. Yeah. Same with the Black Keys. Didn't listen to them until sometime in the 2010s or later. Same with the Perfect Circle. Even though I had been listening to what's the band that members come from? Tool. What album by Tool would that be? Is it Enema? I can never, yeah. Anyway, one of their earlier albums. I listened to Think Tank this week and listened to it before. By this time, I wasn't really listening to much Opeth. Previously, I'd listened to. I'm trying to remember the album now, actually. Yeah, I'm sure it'll come to me. I think it's got the track Melissa on it, if I've got it right. Same with the White Stripes, not until a lot later, and this Radiohead album a lot later. So really, on the rock side of things, yeah, a lot of this stuff here, a lot later down the line. Let's look at going to metal. So, yeah, I definitely listened to this when it came out, and this. Deftones, I have White Pony and Around the Fur, I think. And I think I listened to, I can't remember which ones I listened to when they came out, but I certainly haven't listened to this album. I have this album, although that wasn't until a bit later. Yeah, I bought this around the time it came out. And this. And this. And that. And that. So yeah, I think you can see where my allegiance is laid at that point. No doubt when we look at the Terrorizer end of year, and this as well. I had listened to some earlier Arch Enemy, but didn't lock into them again until a bit later. So yeah, quite a number of albums here I listened to when they came out, but things like Below the Lights, Anthems and Rebellion, who else? Yeah, this not until the following album. I did have a copy of The Burning Red, but I didn't pick this album up until... This is probably my favourite Machine Head album, actually, but I didn't pick it up until after they released The Blackening. And this, I didn't really get into Lamb of God until a lot later. Is it Sacrament? I think around that album, which I think was after this. Yeah, so a bit of a mixed bag there, like you saw the ones that I highlighted. But yeah, I remember specifically listening to these a lot at the time they came out. So I was definitely sort of going down a slightly, I don't know, what would you call it? I'm trying to even think of what genre these bands fall into. But I definitely deviated from out and out heavy stuff. I mean, I wasn't listening. I did listen to this album, but and Viva, Catatonia were dialing things back a little bit as well. So, but I pretty much bought every Catatonia album when it came out from around the time of just after Brave Murder Day. So yeah, I was definitely locked into them for a number of years. Yeah, what I listened to here, nothing really. I think I listened to this many years later. I already mentioned Billy Talent, but that wasn't until a lot later. Any albums here that I listened to when they came out? I don't think so. I think all of it's retrospective, you know. So I can only see albums I listen to retrospectively, which would be this album. This one. And I did listen to From Here to Infirmary by Alkaline Trio, but that's the only Alkaline Trio album I'm aware of. I've never listened to this one. Electronic releases. Was I even... The funny thing is this. This album, I think I have the original EP that came out first. And then this came out again. They re-released it, I think, in 2003. So I can't remember if I also have this on CD as well. But I do have the original EP, which just has the Tour de France stuff on it. Not all of the stuff. Well, it is all Tour de France stuff, but the original one that they released around the time they first recorded something. So that's... Oh, and this Life for Rent by Dido. I think were the only two albums that sort of fall into that category. But like I say, I don't think I actively sought this out, this sort of repackaged one, until a little bit later. Yeah, it doesn't look like I was listening to that much electronic at the time, in terms of the most popular albums. Stuff like Patrick Wolf, didn't listen to until the late 2000s. I did listen to the first Uncle album, but I don't think this is it. But no, that was about it. And this one I didn't listen to until a lot later. I did do a podcast, I think, about Prefuse 73, but I didn't discover them until the late 2000s. Same with Goldfrapp. Massive Attack hadn't really kept up with beyond, I mentioned about in a previous episode of Album Musings, I was talking about Blue Lines, actually last week. But yeah, I didn't listen to this at all. And quite a number of these, like Dizzy Rascal, M83, even though I was aware of them later on, in the 2010s, or well, maybe 2008, 2009, I did listen to this recently in the last week, and Fortet, and this album as well. So again, apart from Dido and the fact that I already heard parts of this, really on the electronic side of things, most of the stuff here, which I have ultimately listened to, it's been a lot later. Okay. Post-rock. This. I think everything here, if I've ever listened to it, would be after the fact. Pretty safe there. Yeah. Any Mogwai stuff. Who else might be here? Any Grails. Sioros. Yeah, all after the fact. Pop albums, right. So... Well, I think that's a big zero on just the first page, actually. Yeah. So after the fact would be Sarah McLachlan and Melanie C. Yeah, that's it. And then just generally album releases I always tend to do at the end, just to see if I've missed anything. So, but yeah, both the Jay-Z albums and the Outkast albums didn't listen to until many, many years later. Never listened to St. Anger, I don't think, or Death Cab for Cutie, or Mars Volta. And obviously I've highlighted some of these already that I have, but what else that's here that we haven't seen already? Amy Winehouse, not until a lot later. Back to Black I didn't listen to in full until 2010s. this album, 3 Days Grace, not until a lot later, I think, as I pointed out. Oh yeah, of course, Dope Smoker. Yeah, that wasn't until whenever I got into drone, stuff like that. So that would have been late 2000s for that. Yeah, that's a really good album. I didn't really start listening to this band properly until a lot later. I mean, they were playing on the radio, but yeah. Same with Sleeping with Ghosts. Although I bought the first Placebo album when it came out, I didn't really keep up. Typo Negative, I didn't buy this album when it came out. Yeah. So I'll include a link to this. This was recorded in 2011, but if you want to check out some Explosions in the Sky, this is a pretty good recording. Yeah. And it's got Your Hand in Mine here. But it's got stuff from other albums as well, so I thought it'd be an interesting one to suggest. I think it has Your Hand in Mine. Oh, there it is, yeah. Yeah. And from that you can find out lots of other stuff. Okay, let's look at Kerrang, see if there's anything I've missed. I did buy that album, I think, around about the time it came out. But apart from that, everything else in here, either I didn't listen to or I've already pointed out. Oh yeah, I did buy this when it came out as well. Cave In by Antenna. Yeah, interesting that didn't come up. Okay, let's have a look at this. Yeah. So on this, yeah, so that one, that one, that one. Harbinger of Metal. Trying to remember what Reverend Bizarre album I outline. It might be that one. I know based on the cover. Let me just. Yeah, I do have that. So yeah. So I must have been starting to gravitate towards like slower, so do metal and stuff like that. So probably. Oh yeah, I mentioned about this. So yeah. Yeah, I bought that. Oh, that came out then. Okay. I didn't buy that until a lot later. And this is one I mentioned. Okay, so a quick overview of the UK chart situation at the time, just to see what was going on in the popular charts. Not that it's something I really looked into, but certainly if I was driving around with the radio on, stuff I would have heard. So yeah, and of course some of this stuff would have been maybe released the previous year, but it gives you quite a nice sort of background. So yeah, Sound of the Underground, Girls Aloud. Okay, what do I remember from that time? Yep, Christina Aguilera, R. Kelly, Busted. Yeah, this got in the charts. Beyonce. Oh, that was the time they released Changes. And there was that re-recorded Mad World as well. So, the number one albums, I think this came out the previous year. Yeah, it did. I do have this album, because it's got Me and My Monkey on it. But I didn't buy it until, I don't think I bought it until this year, until 2003. So yeah, this... I remember this being all over the charts, not surprisingly. I didn't succumb until years later. So this was the album that was actually released that year. This one must have... Hang on. So Think Tank and Hail to the Thief were both out. Oh, okay. I did not... Interesting. Okay. So that came out in May. And then this came out in... Okay. So this one I did around that time. This one, for some reason, I didn't. Okay. And Escapology came back in. Yeah, I remember this album. Yeah, Absolution, I for Rent 2 already flagged up. Yeah, a lot of this stuff, really. I mean, The Darkness, Evanescence are the only thing. Dido, White Flag. I think are the only things that spring out to me. There's more darkness there. Here, what did I have at the time? This one, as I've mentioned, this a little about a year. Well, this again, it came out the previous year, so Meteora. Interesting. So yeah, I mean, some of the stuff that I was listening to at the time did get in the charts, but again, it was stuff like Evanescence, and I mean, I think they just classified as a rock band really more than anything. What genre? Linkin Park, and yeah, alternative rock, new metal, rap rock. So yeah, alternative rock, I would say. So there we have it. I hope you've enjoyed that. Just me musing about this album and why I wasn't specifically listening to it at the time, even though it came on to be like one of my all-time favourite albums. And I devoured several years later, probably more to the end of 2000s. Thanks once again for watching. Bye for now. And I will catch you in a future episode.